If you look at the three domains, just move this over. And I asked you, what is the main difference? What's the difference between eukaryotes and bacteria? And eukaryotes and archaebacteria? What's the answer? So what about it? We can't say, good. Eukaryotes has a nucleus, and bacteria and archaebacteria do not. So let's just go like this. Whoops. And today we're going to learn about these kingdoms. I just wanted to go back and remind you that the first level of classification is domain, and you divide organisms between has a nucleus and does not, and then we go on and divide them all into kingdoms. How many kingdoms do we have? Six. How many did we start with? Two. What were they? Plants and animals. And then they divided into how many? No. Five. Monarans, which if we go to this slide right here, Monera was a kingdom that described bacteria, see? And then the other kingdoms are what? Who can name them? Protists, and you could say Protist, Protista, doesn't matter then. Fungi, plants, and animals. Now we have six kingdoms. Monera branched out into what two kingdoms? Archaebacteria and eubacteria. Let's talk about all of these kingdoms today, okay? So we're going to go here and we're going to talk about the first kingdom. It's important to know the kingdoms in order because the more you go up the kingdoms, the more complex the organism gets. Go ahead and write that down. Let's just add this right in this slide over here. Which is right here. Just add a statement. Important to know order because animals are the most complex. And I'll ask you complexity questions as we get to know the kingdoms, okay? Because of complexity, and animals are the most complex. So who's a little bit less complex than animals? Plants, good, okay? Why do you think plants are more complex than protists, let's say? Not necessarily. More cells. Protists are single-celled mainly, right? Plants are multi-celled. There's a complexity, okay? The way you feed is also a complexity, but there's a lot of autotrophic protists, so we can't really say that's the main difference. So I'll ask you questions like that throughout the notes. What's my first kingdom and least complex kingdom? No. Archaebacteria. First kingdom and least complex kingdom is a type of bacteria. Why do you think it's the least complex? Doesn't have a nucleus. It is an organism that does not have a nucleus in its cell. It's prokaryotic. And remember that we already defined all these words here, right here. If you need to rewrite them, that prokaryotic means no nucleus, by all means, write it again, okay? I'm expecting you to know those definitions. So archaebacteria are all prokaryotic organisms. What's their cell condition? Unicellular or single-celled. How do they feed? They're autotrophs and they're heterotrophs, okay? Believe it or not, they're mostly heterotrophs, but they also make their own food, and a lot of them do this through a process called chemosynthesis. Archaebacteria, think of A for archae, A for ancient. So highlight this A, highlight the word ancient. They are the bacteria of the first bacteria, let's say. They're not really what we consider the bacteria we reference today. They live in harsh environments. Like this is a harsh environment. This is the bottom of the ocean or the abyss. There's hydrothermal vents in the bottom. And that heat, along with bacteria, make their own food through a process called chemosynthesis. They use the chemicals of sulfur and carbon dioxide coming from what this is like an undersea volcano. That's how they make their own food, the ones that live in harsh environments. And can bacteria, what's the fourth condition we're going to look at?
If they can move or not.
They can move. And the reason bacteria can move is because they have structures in them that allow them to move. This particular one is flagellum. On this test, you don't have to know that, but when we get into the actual kingdom of bacteria, we start to learn about specific structures that are associated with bacteria. Right there. What's my next kingdom? I'll go back.
Fungi.
Nope. Eubacteria. Who could tell me what are the four characteristics we're going to look at? Not what they are. What are they? Okay, good. No nucleus. What's the second characteristic?
Unicellular.
What are they? Unicellular. Bacteria is unicellular. Again, they feed the same. And again, they can move. So really, you're probably saying, how can these be two separate kingdoms? Eubacteria and Archaebacteria are almost the same thing. They are prokaryotic, unicellular, mostly heterotrophic, some autotrophic, and motile. The difference is in their cell structure. And we're not going to learn about that now. We'll learn about that after. And also where they're located. So common bacteria of today live in other organisms, right? They break down food. If they're heterotrophic, they break down food and recycle matter. They're like one of the most important organisms, or they're disease-causing organisms, like ones we're going to study. What's my next kingdom? Protists. So already, what's the first three or least complex kingdoms? Archaea, Eubacteria, Protists. What we're going to ask ourselves now, there's really not a difference between Archaea and Eubacteria to talk about complexity. So let's think, when we cover protists, why do you think they're the most complex? And we'll answer this in a minute. Tell me about their conditions and what makes them part of this kingdom. Nuclear condition. Nuclear condition.
No.
They have a nucleus. So what do we call them? Eukaryotes. Okay? They are mostly, what's their cell condition? Look at this picture. Uni. They're mostly uni. So this is a protist right here. This is a protist right here. These are protists inside here. Okay, but some of them are multicellular. Like algae is a type of protist that's a multicellular protist. Okay, but we're going to say mostly unicellular. And like I told you on this test, if it's mostly uni, we're remembering uni only. Okay, later we'll learn that there's other kinds. How do they feed? We've got plant-like protists, animal-like protists, and fungus-like protists. So how do you think they feed? Who would be auto? Plant-like. And who would be hetero? Animal-like. They feed both ways. Can they move? Yes. Some protists cannot. Most can. And this picture, what you see, anybody know what that structure is that allows them to move? Cilia. Good. Flagella was what I showed you in the bacteria. Cilia is what you're seeing in this protist, which are little hairs. Now, if I was going to ask you what makes protists more complex than bacteria, what's your answer? They're eukaryotic. They're the most complex single-celled organism because from here on out, all we talk about is multicellular, but they are eukaryotic, which makes them the most complex single-celled organism, okay? Because they have a nucleus. Thanks.
Yes.
So the next kingdom is fungi. Tell me about their, tell me about their nuclear condition. They have a nucleus. So guys, remember, the only organisms without a nucleus are what? Bacteria. What kingdom do bacteria belong to? Archaea and Eubacteria. After that, so this is why order is everything. Kingdom 3, 4, 5, and 6 all have a nucleus. Kingdom 3 is the last single-celled organism. So kingdom 4, 5, and 6 all are multicellular. So automatic we know Eukaryotic, multicellular. How do fungus feed? If you're a decomposer, what kind of feeder are you? Heterotroph. You cannot make your own food. You consume and break down waste, like bacteria does, because bacteria are decomposers as well. And what about their mobility or motility? Cannot move. Fungus respond to stimuli, but they cannot move to where there's sunlight. They cannot move to where they could get nutrients. They have to respond to that in the environment and try to obtain them. This is Kingdom 5.
It's complex.
What? Eukaryotic. What else? Multicellular. How do they feed? Autotrophs. They photosynthesize, right? And then they can't move. They respond to stimuli. So what's the difference between fungi and plants? The way they feed. That's it. Everything else is the same. They're both eukaryotic. They're both multicellular. One makes its own food. One does not. And they both cannot move. That is it. So if you look at complexity, why are plants more complex? Really, that's a tough question. They're just later in the classification system. Now, something else I want you to know is that plants make their own food through photosynthesis, something we learned before. That's a picture of what that is. Yes. Last kingdom and most complex organism is Animalia, right? Tell me about them.
They're eukaryotic.
Eukaryotic, multicellular, hetero,
And they're
move. Okay? So what makes us more complex than fungi and plants? We can move. Yes? Oh, and when I wanted to tell you about plants, because this question always comes up, what about the Venus flytrap, right? So there's a subphylum inside the kingdom plant. Remember kingdom, phylum, say it.
class, order, genus,
Kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. Okay, say it again.
Kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus.
You gotta get that, okay? So they do make their own food, the Venus flytrap, but they also consume. So they photosynthesize, and they're also carnivores, and they eat meat. All right, this is the last slide, and this is our classification system. You do not have to know every single part of it, okay? I just wanted to expose it to you. We are part of the domain eukaryotes because we have what? Nucleus. Who else is part of that domain?
3, 4.
Animals, plants,
Bacteria? No.
everybody but bacteria. So protists, fungi, plants, and animals have a nucleus. So our kingdom is, our domain is eukaryotic. Our kingdom is Animalia, phylum Chordata, class Mammalia, order primates, family hominids, genus Homo, and our species is Homo sapiens. So our scientific name is Homo sapiens. Homo coming from the genus, sapiens coming from species.